Immigrants. People that move from one country to another. In this video, we're going to focus on immigration into Europe, specifically understanding which European countries have the largest percentage of immigrants within their population and where those immigrants come from. Immigration to Europe has a long history throughout time, but it has increased substantially after World War II. Western European countries especially saw high growths in this, and many European nations today have sizable immigrant populations, both of European and non-European origin. With contemporary globalization, migrations to Europe have accelerated in speed and scale from many places across the world, namely Asia and Africa. So let's jump into this. But first, a quick message from today's sponsor, World of Warships. World of Warships is a free-to-play game available on PC and consoles. In it, you can take control of many significant ships and conquer the oceans aboard some of history's most iconic battleships, destroyers, aircraft carriers, or submarines. They add new content every month, ships, in-game nations, cosmetics, among others, so you can always expect a fresh gameplay experience that also counts on amazing graphics and more than 30 unique maps with dynamic weather. They even say it's hard to tell apart the in-game sea from the real one. Two crazy updates they had recently were the Godzilla vs. Kong and the Transformers one. There's an active and engaged community both in-game and through their Discord, so it's really a place to find and be a part of that community. And since the start of October, all active players have access to the exclusive Captain's Club, where you can find discounts and offers from World of Warships partners like Razer and more. If you want to try it out, download World of Warships today using the link in the description and use the promo code BRAVO to receive a huge starter pack of 500 doubloons, 1.5 million credits, 7 days of premium account time, and a free ship. Now, back to the video. I think the easiest way is to start with an overview of the map I used for the thumbnail, presented in a more illustrative way. This map takes data from a 2019 UN report on migration and shows us which percentage of each country's population was born abroad. Keep in mind these values include EU citizens in other EU countries, I think, and the color scale gives us an immediate understanding of the trends. North and West Europe are the main destinations for immigrants in Europe. These are the countries with a percentage of foreign-born population between 15 and 20%. We can find countries like Iceland, Ireland, Norway, Sweden, Germany, Belgium, Austria, San Marino, Malta, and Cyprus in this category. In the previous category, we have countries that have 10 to 15%, Spain, France, the UK, Italy, Slovenia, Croatia, Montenegro, Greece, the Netherlands, Denmark, Estonia, Latvia, Belarus, and Ukraine. Moving the opposite way, we have countries with 20 to 50% immigrants. Switzerland and Luxembourg are the only ones. In fact, Luxembourg is, apart from microstates, the country with the highest percentage of foreign-born citizens in Europe, a gigantic 47.4%. Some microstates surpass this due to their very small size and low or even non-existing native population, those in the darkest blue, Andorra, Monaco, Liechtenstein, and the Vatican, which has 100%. And then we go back to the lighter shades with the lesser percentages. In green, between 5 and 10, Portugal, Hungary, Serbia, North Macedonia, Turkey, Russia, and Finland. And finally, the category with the absolute smallest percentage in yellow, Poland, Lithuania, Czechia, Slovakia, Bosnia, Albania, Bulgaria, Romania, and Moldova. Poland, Albania, and Bosnia are the countries with the fewer percentages at 1.7, 1.72, and 1.1 respectively. Keep in mind these values are from 2019, and so the percentages may have changed somewhat, but I believe none of the countries has left their respective category. Now, we can't go case by case, there's 40-something countries in Europe, so this video would go on forever. What I think would be interesting to do now, as a compromise of sorts, would be to go into two examples from each of these categories to take a closer look at their immigration percentages and understand why they are so low or so high, where the immigrants come from, and how those reasons may vary depending on the case, even if they belong to the same category percentage-wise. Let's start with the lowest scale, choosing Poland. Poland does have a pretty strict policy towards taking in people, especially those that come from outside of Europe, but this isn't the only reason why it only has 1.7% of immigrants. Historically, Poland has been an immigrant country with an E. People mostly left rather than came in. In fact, they were even wiped off the map a couple of times, so there was nowhere to move into. Only after 2014 was there an uptick in immigrants with the growth of their economy starting. By 2021, out of all their citizens, 300,000 were Ukrainian, 30,000 Belarusian, 11,000 Russian, 9,500 Vietnamese, and 5,000 German, with other groups being much smaller. After the 2022 invasion began in Ukraine, millions of refugees crossed over into Poland, with many of them choosing to stay there. Projections point to at least 1 million, which added to the 300,000 would now represent around 3% of the total population, showing us how that initial map is already somewhat outdated, although not moving into the next category as we saw, and how this is such an ever-changing number for every country. Poland's National Insurance Fund has also stated that the country needs 2 million immigrants to counteract the aging of their society, so we may see a further shift in this soon. Bosnia also has only 1% immigrants according to that map, but for different reasons. Bosnia is a very ethnically diverse country. The name of the country may be Bosnia and Herzegovina, but within its borders there are not only Bosniaks, but also Serbs and Croats. These are seen as nationals and not considered immigrants, which necessarily lowers the percentage. It's also a pretty struggling country from an economic and social point of view, still recovering from the devastating war it went through not too long ago, and so there aren't that many people from other countries that want to move there. In the next category we have, for instance, Portugal. Portugal has a small 10 million population, and it honestly surprised me that their percentage was this low. There's only about 800,000 immigrants in the country, representing 8% of the population. The reason why I was surprised is that Portugal has a special connection to many other countries in the world, those of its former colonial empire. They also speak Portuguese and so have an ease of moving to Portugal as they can immediately speak the language, also benefiting from migration treaties. Of those 800,000, 300,000 are from Brazil, proving this theory a little, but the next biggest group is from the UK at 45,000. Many British people choose to retire in Portugal, and this number increased further after Brexit, as many wanted to keep living in the EU. After them are Cape Verdeans at 36,000, Indians with the same value, then surprisingly Italy at 34,000, Angola at 31, and France at 27. Ukrainian migrants numbers also went up with the refugee wave, but they still only count up to 25,000. Portugal has a very welcoming policy towards migrants, which shows us that that alone isn't enough to have a large percentage. Another example in this category is Hungary, which also has pretty strict migration laws, similarly to Poland. Again, EU citizens have much more ease as they have freedom of movement and they don't need visas. Out of the top 17 nationalities within Hungary, all that have over 2,000 people, 8 of them are from EU countries. The biggest group are Ukrainians though at 30,000, then Germans at 19, Chinese at 17, then Romanians and Slovaks, likely due to Hungary's historic and current borders. Also, due to its geographical location, Hungary has sort of been a passing through place for many refugees from the Middle East. They border Germany, which was eager to take them in, and that, paired with their desire to not let them stay, contributed to the low percentages. However, in August of last year, Le Monde published an article titled, "Faced with a lack of manpower, Hungary quietly opens up to immigration." So while they may have been very strict about it in the past, this may change soon. Moving up to the 10-15% scale, let's use France as a first example. They have 13%. Similarly to Portugal, France has a lot of immigrants from the countries that formerly made up their colonial empire, mostly from North Africa. They grew up speaking French, and this makes it easier to move to France in search of a better life. In fact, the African proportion of both migrants and residents in France is increasing, and by 2022, nearly a majority, 48% of all immigrants come from Africa. 32% come from Europe, 13.5% come from Asia, and 6% from the Americas and Oceania. But France's attractive role as a migration destination isn't recent, and before Africa, thousands and thousands of other Europeans moved there as well. from the 19th century onwards, the pace of industrial growth and the size of the country attracted millions of Europeans, with especially large numbers arriving from Poland, Belgium, Portugal, Italy, and Spain. Portuguese migration to France was especially big during the 20th century as they escaped a colonial war and oppressive regime. Even today, up to 3% of the French population is Portuguese or of Portuguese origin. While another example within this category is Estonia at 14%. Of those, 8% are Russian, 2% Ukrainian. Although this predated the invasion, estimates point to a doubling of that value to 4% now, and 2% from other countries. Oddly, the numbers from Latvia and Lithuania are super low, as well as from Finland. The present immigrant population in Estonia is almost in its entirety a result of their occupation by the Soviet Union up to 1991. Many people born in other former Soviet countries moved there before they regained independence, and today many of them still count as immigrants. Next, Germany with 15% to represent the 15-20 scale. Germany was the country which during the Middle Eastern refugee crisis took in the most amount of immigrants, at least within Europe, around 1 million of them. However, they have a huge population of over 80 million, and so this didn't make much of a change percentage-wise. This chart shows us how a lot of people migrate to Germany every year, but how there was a peak in 2015 due to this wave. The United Nations Population Fund lists Germany as host to the third highest number of international migrants worldwide when it comes to absolute numbers, not percentages. As of 2022, the largest group are Turks at 11% of all immigrants, followed by Ukrainians at 9% and Syrians at 6%. Germany has long been known for a comparatively open migration policy, partly the result of decades of low birth rates and a large labor market that just needed people from the outside. While Belgium has similar percentages at 17%, but for different reasons. Belgium is sort of a fake country, if you will. They aren't a nation state per se, they're Flemish in the north, which are close to being Dutch, and Wallonians in the south, which are close to being French. At the same time, they're in between Germany, France, and the Netherlands, and they hold the capital city of the EU, Brussels, which leads many people to move there to work for EU organizations. This is shown by the fact that out of all immigrants in Belgium, 75% of them are from European countries, something that isn't the case for their neighbors. French and Dutch rank up top, followed by Italians due to a post-World War II migration treaty to extract coal. But we can see that the reasons for their percentage number are different than Germany's. The second top group only has two countries, so let's look at both. First, Luxembourg at 47%. Luxembourg's super high immigrant percentage has mostly three reasons. One, it's economically appealing, the minimum wage is high and the quality of life as well. Two, it's easily accessible by neighboring countries within the EU. And three, they have a very low native population. Out of the 640,000 population, 300,000 are foreign-born. And if you thought France had a high percentage of Portuguese people, guess again, because Luxembourg has 92,000 Portuguese, the highest immigrant group, representing 14.5% of their population. And then Switzerland at 30%, the country with the highest percentage of immigrants in Europe if you rule out microstates and Luxembourg, which I guess is a little bit of a microstate too. 31% today are first-generation immigrants. If you include second generation, that number goes up to 40%, so a very large part of the population has a migration background. Most of them come from the neighboring countries, Italy, Germany, and France. However, the country that actually ranks number 3 is, again, Portugal, at 260,000 people. A surprising fifth place also goes to Kosovo at 115,000. Switzerland is a very wealthy country with incredibly high salaries and quality of life. This leads to many people from less fortunate countries, both inside and outside Europe, to move there. At the same time, a lot of rich people move there as well due to the high income-friendly taxes. And finally, the top category of 50 to 100%, which is only made up of the microstates, such as Andorra, which is actually one of the countries in the world with the highest percentage of immigrants at 58%. Andorrans, who are ethnically Catalans, are a minority in their own country. Spanish, French, and Portuguese residents make up 67% of the population. Spain and France co-rule the country and are the only two that border them, so it makes sense they move there since it's a pretty nice place and offers reasonably high wages. As for the Portuguese, it may be connected to the thousands of people that escaped the Portuguese dictatorship in the 20th century. Many of them went to France, but those who didn't make it across the Pyrenees may have stuck around in Andorra. Spain wasn't an option since it also had a dictatorial regime. Or the Vatican, which has 100% immigrants simply due to the fact that nobody is born there. Out of the 799 inhabitants, all of them moved from somewhere else. A similar situation happens with Liechtenstein or Monaco, where people of high income move there due to the luxury lifestyle they offer. So, those are the European countries with most and least percentages of immigrants. Understanding that these values are in constant shift and are difficult to know precisely at the moment. Also, that percentages are a questionable way of looking at something. If country A has 100 million people and 10% immigrants, they'll have 10 million immigrants, while country B with 10 million people and 15% immigrants only has 1.5 million. The microstates are a perfect example of this. Smaller percentages don't necessarily mean lower absolute numbers. In the same way that lower or higher percentages, especially lower, don't necessarily mean that the local national government has a closed borders policy towards immigrants or an open arms policy. Even though they might, there can be different factors in play as well, as we saw with Poland versus Bosnia, or Portugal versus Hungary, or France versus Estonia. What do you think about this topic? Does your country have a high percentage of immigrants? Also, would you like to see an opposite analysis in a video of which countries have the most or least percentage of their population living abroad? As we saw, there's so many Portuguese people abroad, around 20% of their population, so the world's biggest diasporas could also be a very interesting topic. Let me know in the comments if you're interested. Thanks so much for watching this video, subscribe if you want, and I will see you next time for more general knowledge.